Welcome back, students. This is Miss Edelin speaking. We're resuming our no side issue, and I'm going to try to get this all in one shot. If I don't, you're going to have to read the rest on your own. I'm going to skip a little bit on this page on 140, okay? Basically, he lists off all these recommendations that schools make where they say to the kids, throw things at the person that has a gun. So you can look them over. I'm going to start at the bottom of 140 where it says, it is, of course, possible to distract a heavily armed psychotic on a suicide mission by throwing an iPod at him or a pencil, but it is more likely that the psychotic would respond by shooting the pencil thrower. The existence of these policies suggests that the university knows that they cannot protect these students during an armed attack. At Virginia Tech, the gunman killed 30 students and faculty members in the 10 minutes it took the police to arrive and penetrate the building he had blockaded, and yet these schools will not allow adults with state-issued concealed carry permits to bring their weapons onto campus as they would be able to almost anywhere else. Possession or storage of a deadly weapon, destructive device, or fireworks in any form is prohibited, West Virginia's university policy states. To gun rights advocates, these policies are absurd. The fact that universities are providing the faculties and students with the sort of information is, of course, an admission that they can't protect them. Dave Koppel told me. The universities are unable to protect people, but then they disable people from protecting themselves. It is also illogical for campuses to advertise themselves as gun-free. Someone bent on murder is not usually dissuaded by posted anti-gun regulations. Quite the opposite. Publicly describing your property as gun-free is analogous to posting a notice on your front door saying your home has no burglar alarm. As it happens, the company that owns the Century 16 Cineplex in Aurora had declared the property a gun-free zone. As a security measure, it doesn't seem like advertising that fact is a good idea, Adam Winkler said, of avowedly gun-free campuses, though he adds that advertising a school's gun-free status does provide notice to potentially immature youth that they're not allowed to have guns. In Colorado, the epicenter of the American gun argument, and the state Supreme Court recently ruled that the University of Colorado must lift its ban on the carrying of concealed weapons by owners who have been licensed by local sheriffs. The university has responded by requiring students who own guns to move to a specified housing complex. The ruling has caused anxiety among some faculty. The chairman of the faculty assembly, a physics professor named Jerry Peterson, told the Boulder Daily Camera, my own personal policy in my class is if I'm aware that there's a firearm in the class, registered or unregistered, concealed or unconcealed, the class session's immediately canceled. I want my students to feel unconstrained in their discussions. Peterson makes two assumptions. The first is that he will know whether someone is carrying a concealed weapon in class. The second is that students will feel frightened about sharing their opinions if a gun is present. I could find no evidence that any American educational institution has ever seen fatalities or serious gun-related injuries result from a heated classroom discussion. Claire Levy, a Colorado state legislator, said she intends to introduce a bill that would ban guns once again. If discussions in class escalated, she argues, the mere fact that someone is potentially armed could have an inhibiting effect on the classroom. This is genuinely scary to faculty members. The push to open up campuses to concealed carry permit holders, Levy says, is motivated by ideological gun rights advocacy rather than an actual concern for campus safety. Guns, even those owned by licensed and trained individuals, she insists, would simply make a campus more dangerous. American campuses are the safest places in the whole world, she said. The homicide rate on campuses is a small fraction of the rate in the rest of the country, so there's no actual rational public safety reason that anyone should need to bring a gun to campus. However, the University of Colorado's own active shooter recommendations state active harming incidents have occurred at a number of locations in recent years, and the University of Colorado is not immune to this potential. While the odds of this occurring at CU are small, the consequences are so potentially catastrophic it makes sense for all students, staff, faculty, and visitors to CU to consider the possibilities of such an incident occurring here. In making her argument against concealed carry weapons to me, Levy painted a bit of a contradictory picture. On one hand, campuses are the safest place in the country. On the other hand, campuses life is so inherently dangerous that the introduction of even licensed guns could mean mayhem. You're in the milieu of drugs and alcohol and impulsive behavior and mental illness. You've got a population that has a high propensity for suicide, she told me. Theft is a big concern, and what if you have a concealed carry gun and you're drinking and become violent? For much of the population of a typical campus, concealed carry permitting is not an issue. Most states that issue permits will grant them only to people with at least 21 years of age. But the crime rate statistic at universities that do allow permit holders on campus with their weapons are instructive. An hour north of Boulder in Fort Collins sits Colorado State University. Concealed carry has been allowed at CSU since 2003. And according to James Alderton, the former sheriff of Larimer County, which encompasses Fort Collins, violent crime at Colorado State has dropped since then. Despite the fact that CSU experienced no violent incident involving concealed carry permit holders, the university governing board voted 2 years ago to ban concealed carry. The ban never went into effect, however, because the state appeals court soon ruled against a similar ban at the University of Colorado, and because Sheriff Alderton announced that he would undermine the ban by refusing to process any violator in the county jail, which serves the university's police department. Alderton, who recently retired, told me that opponents of concealed carry make an emotional argument rather than a logical one. No one could show me any study that concealed carry leads to more crime and more violence. My idea of self-defense is not those red rape phones on campus where you get to the phone and tell someone you're getting raped. I have a daughter, and I'd rather have her have the ability to defend herself. I'm not going to violate a citizen's right to self-defense because someone else has an emotional feeling about guns. Though Colorado is slowly shading blue, Alderton said he believes most of the residents still don't rely on the government to protect them. He added, maybe in Boulder they do, but most people believe they have a right to self-defense. Boulder may be the locus of left-wing politics to Colorado, but it is also home to the oversubscribed Boulder Rifle Club, which I visited on an early morning with Dave Koppel of the Independence Institute. The existence of the Rifle Club surprised me given Boulder's reputation, but Koppel argued that gun ownership and sport shooting are not partisan phenomenon, and he made the plausible assertion that Boulder is home to the largest population of armed vegans in America. I wanted to understand from Koppel the best arguments against government intervention in gun ownership, and Koppel wanted to fire some of the many handguns he owns. So we alternately talked and shot. Now, I'm not going to read all these guns off because he lists a whole bunch of different guns. Skip on down to the Ruger Alaskan is the most powerful weapon we used, but the act of firing even a .22 underscores for most thinking people the notion that firing a gun is a serious business. Koppel argued that a law-abiding citizen is less likely to get into a confrontation after a traffic accident or an exchange of insults if he or she is carrying a weapon. You're aware of the power you have, and you naturally want to use that power very carefully. I expressed to Koppel my concern that the overly lax standards some states set for concealed carry permitting means that the occasional cowboy gets passed through the system. Florida, which has among the most relaxed standards for gun permitting and granted a license to George Zimmerman, who famously killed Trayvon Martin apparently during an exercise in freelance vigilantism, is a case in point. Zimmerman has pled not guilty, claiming he shot Martin in self-defense. Applicants in Florida must submit to a background check, take a brief class, and pay $112 to obtain a license. In Colorado, the standards are slightly more stringent. Permit seekers must submit to criminal checks, fingerprinting, safety classes, but in addition they must pass what James Alderton referred to as a naked man rule. If a local sheriff learns that a person has no criminal record and has not been deemed mentally ill but nevertheless was, say, found naked one night in a field howling at the moon, the sheriff is granted the discretion to deny the person a permit. Koppel argued correctly that Florida, like Colorado, has seen a drop in crime since 1987 when it started granting concealed carry permits, which suggests to him that permit holders are not, in the main, engaging in crime sprees or taking the law into their own hands. But for Koppel, the rigor or laxity of the permitting process from state to state is not his principal concern, because he believes that in most cases the government has no right to interfere with an adult's decision to buy or carry a weapon. Those who seek to curtail gun rights, he insists, are promoting the infantilization of Americans. If they get their way, he said of the anti-gun forces, people who are the victims of violent crimes wouldn't be able to fight back. Women who are abused wouldn't be able to protect themselves. Criminals who know that their intended victim, who have no access to the black market, will be unable to defend themselves. It's more than that, he went on. Telling the population that they are incapable of owning a tool that can be dangerous means they are creating a population that loses the self-reliance and increasingly sees itself as wards of the state. James Alderton put it another way. Your position on concealed carry permits has a lot to do with your position on the reliability and sanity of your fellow man. The ideology of gun ownership absolutism doesn't appeal to me. Unlike hardline gun rights advocates, I do not believe that unregulated gun ownership is a defense against the rise of totalitarianism in America, because I do not believe that America is ripe for totalitarianism. Fear of a tyrannical gun-seizing president is the reason many gun owners oppose firearm registration. But I am sympathetic to the idea of an armed self-defense because it does often work. Because encouraging learned helplessness is morally corrupt, and because, however much I might wish it, the United States is not going to become Canada. Guns are with us, whether we like it or not. Maybe this is tragic, but it is also reality. So Americans who are qualified to possess firearms shouldn't be denied the right to participate in their own defense, and it is emotionally true, empirically true, that the great majority of Americans, tens of millions of law-abiding gun owners, have not created chaos in society. A balanced approach to gun control in the United States will require the warring sides to agree on several contentious issues. Conservative gun right advocates should acknowledge that if in more states had stringent universal background checks, or if a federal law put this in place, more guns would be kept out of the hands of criminals and the dangerously mentally unstable. They should also acknowledge that requiring background checks on buyers at gun shows would not represent a threat to the Constitution. The NRA position on this is fiction, said Dan Gross, the head of the Brady campaign. Universal background checks are not an infringement on our Second Amendment right. This is black helicopter stuff. Gross believes that closing the gun show loophole would be both extremely effective and a politically moderate and achievable goal. The gun lobby must also agree that concealed carry permits should be granted only to people who pass rigorous criminal checks as well as thorough training and safety courses. Anti-gun advocates, meanwhile, should acknowledge that gun control legislation is not the only answer to gun violence. Responsible gun ownership is also an answer. An enormous number of Americans believe this to be the case, and gun control advocates do themselves no favor when they demonize gun owners and advocates of armed self-defense as backwoods barbarians. Liberals sometimes make the mistake of anthropomorphizing guns, ascribing to them moral characteristics they do not possess. Guns can be used to do evil, but guns can also be used to do good. 12 years ago, in the aftermath of Matthew Shepard's murder, Jonathan Rauch launched a national movement when he wrote an article for Salon arguing that gay people should arm themselves against violent bigots. Pink pistol clubs sprang up across America in which gays and lesbians learned how to use firearms in self-defense. Other vulnerable groups have also taken to the idea of concealed carry. In Texas, African American women represent the largest percentage increase of concealed carry permit seekers since 2000. But even more moderate gun control activists such as Dan Gross have trouble accepting that guns in private hands can work effectively to counteract violence. When I asked him the question I posed to Stephen Barton and Tom Mauser, would you, at a moment when a stranger is shooting at you, prefer to have a gun or not, he answered by saying, this is the conversation the gun lobby wants you to be having. He pointed out some of the obvious flaws in concealed carry laws, such as too lax training standards and too much discretionary power on the part of local law enforcement officials. He did say that if concealed carry laws require background checks and training similar to what police recruits undergo, he would be slower to raise objections. But when he added, in a fundamental way, isn't this a question about the kind of society we want to live in? Do we want to live in one in which the answer to violence is more violence, where the answer to guns is more guns? What Gross won't acknowledge is that in a nation of nearly 300 million guns, this question is irrelevant. Whew, we made it. Sorry it took me so long. Get that paper done.